Hi there. I often work with hashes in plain Ruby, especially when I prepare standalone scripts or gem packages. And there were plenty of situations where I needed to do some simple or more complex data transformations to achieve the expected output. In the fourth Hanami Mastery episode, I have described how I easily do fancy manipulations on string objects, but more complex datasets require more powerful tricks to serve our needs, so I have decided to extend this topic. One example of troublesome hash is when I get the hash as a method argument, but if I don't know if the keys are symbols or strings, then things can get messy. Because the expected key does not exist, I receive nil, and I can easily end up with undefined method error, which may be an embarrassing overlook for me in the eyes of my clients. In Rails, you can just call symbolized keys or deep symbolized keys on the given hash, and the problem would be solved. This would work on any deep level of my argument, so no worries at all. But how it would look like outside of the Ruby ecosystem? The deep symbolized keys method is not defined in plain Ruby. Before I will jump into the solution, let me update this hash. I will use a more funny example as an argument from now on. Here is the simplified solution I used in the past all the time using the eachWithObject method. Horrible, but works for plain hashes. However, since Ruby 2.5, we have access to the transform keys methods, which is way more convenient. While this looks fine, none of this will take into account nested hashes. If I would want to solve this problem, things would quickly get messy, and in case of more transformations required on the dataset, I would quickly get lost in my own code. The other very simple example would be to nest a set of keys under a chosen parent. If I store the address information as a JSONB in my database, I will be forced to group the address related keys and store them together under the address column. Again, eachWithObject method would come in handy here. I can iterate through the initial hash, and in case the key is inside of the given set, I nest it under the address root, and otherwise just copy the initial value. If you think it works, you are wrong. It works for symbolized keys, but if you will pass the same hash with strings as keys, the original hash will be returned. Easy to fix? Just let's change the key comparison here to ensure the compared value is a symbol, and we end up with a completely messed hash as a result. It's fixable, of course, but what I want to point out here is the fact that ensuring data to be transformed expectedly is not trivial, and it's extremely easy to overlook a single scenario that can haunt us later. It's already hard to see what's happening here, and again, if there would be several transformations like this required on the given dataset, my code would become really messy and hard to handle. Just imagine that I would need to stringify and rename some keys too. This is where a great little gem comes with help. It's a dry transformer, another amazing micro library put together by Piotr Solnica. It is great as it has completely no dependencies whatsoever. You can inject it in your projects without any risk, and in case you want to have it directly in your codebase, you can even just copy the code, as only plain Ruby is used inside. Amazing stuff. This little library allows you to pass any data as an input and do some crazy transformations to ensure you will work with the expected data format. Okay, but how that could be handy? Well, one example is that in Hanami Mastery I work with JSON API standard when it comes to my API communication. It's super nice, RESTful standard with a lot of overhead already done by very smart people. However, when I want to make my projects to communicate with, for example, GitHub, it would not work as GitHub uses the REST API, which is Rails default. It would be silly to ask them to adjust their API for my needs. So what I should do is transform the incoming data from one standard to another relatively easily and ideally do the two-way transformations. Similar requirements are often needed in case of CSV exports or imports, RSS parsing, user input, code highlighting, markdown files, and so on. There are countless use cases where I can't just validate the input and throw away an error because data are valid. However, in a different format than my script or data store expect. In such scenarios, I should write an adapter that applies a list of transformations to the input and produces the output I can work with. With dry transformer, our simple examples would be trivial. We create our adapter class that gets the data from GitHub and define the list of transformations inside. At the end, we only need to call the adapter instance with a hash as an argument, and as a result, we have transformed dataset. Even if this is still simple, some much more complex scenarios might be done in a simple, easy to read and maintain code. Dry transformer allows you to write middleware for your APIs with no effort. You can do mappings from hash to objects and other way around, advanced array modifications, and a whole bunch of other stuff you would ever need. As I often say, the only thing that restricts us is our imagination, and dry transformer allows you to transform anything into anything else using a tiny DSL written on top of Ruby. Super useful stuff, and I strongly suggest giving it a shot. You may be surprised how easily you can write adapters, serializers, and deserializers from now on. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and if you want to see more content in this fashion, subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter. As always, all links you can find in the description of the video or in the hanamimastery.com. Also, if you have any suggestions of amazing Ruby gems you would like me to cover or ideas on how to improve, please mention them in the comments. I would like to thank Benjamin Klotz for joining my GitHub sponsor. I appreciate that a lot. Any support allows me to spend more time on creating this content, promoting and supporting great open source projects, and helping you use them. So thank you. As always, check out 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for being here, you are awesome, and see you in the next Hanami Mastery episode.